Chocolate kisses. Jameson's chocolate shop had been the largest in the city for many generations. The business, like everything associated with my family, adhered to tradition. At the turn of the 20th century, I was Jameson V, not because our family tree wasn't longer, but because a few generations earlier, an ancestor had made the mistake of naming his son Steve. Until today, no one had forgiven him. Our recipes were the key to our success and very popular. Executed over and over again with millimeter care, we used the best materials and the perfect combinations of ingredients to make the most delicious artisan chocolates in the world, recognized for their high quality and exquisite flavor. My whole life revolved around running my small but very profitable store on Main Street. It was connected to a workshop where sweets were made and a cafeteria where, in addition to selling them, I offered hot drinks to my customers. It was my perfect corner in the world. The place was always neat and tidy, a vital part of executing my recipes. My employees were familiar with my preferences and took great care not to overstep. In that perfect place in the universe, I spent the whole day surrounded by the intense aroma of chocolate, a scent I could never tire of. With the same meticulousness I had maintained for 42 years, I would heat and mix the ingredients in a huge pot, which I would later pour into the molds. The flavors of my chocolates were as classic as they were delicious: liquor, dried fruit, caramel, vanilla, and mint. One day of heavy rain, the peace of my life was shattered by an explosion in the form of a woman. Like thunder and lightning combined, Antonia burst through the door of my store, bringing with her a whirlwind of water, shopping bags, and joy, accompanied by an intense scent of jasmine that lingered around her. Antonia apologized numerous times for wetting the floor and taking up so much space with her large packages. She sat at the table in the corner, and when I went to attend to her, she asked me to serve her my best chocolates and a very hot coffee. I can't rationally determine what prompted me to sit down with her when she suggested it. I suppose it was her intense hazel eyes, her voluminous brown hair, or her prominent cleavage that she modestly hid with a red shawl. I imagine it was the whole ensemble that managed to persuade me to have a cup in her company. By tradition, it was quite common for us Jamesons to marry a Mary, an Anne, an Elizabeth, and, for the very daring, perhaps a Louise. My family had always opted for conservative women who loved order as much as we did. I don't know how I ended up married to that hurricane of passion called Antonia. The one who became my wife couldn't be more opposed to me. Antonia was a cook in a restaurant on the same street. She had barely arrived in the city and had already captivated everyone in the neighborhood with her extravagant and innovative recipes. It was never clear to me why Antonia had taken an interest in me. With her voluptuous physique, culinary skills, and natural charisma, she could have chosen anyone. But for some reason, she was interested in me, a short, plump man with a lot of hair on my head and a thick mustache, which, according to Antonia, was my best feature. At first, Antonia was content with disrupting my private life. She came to mess up my house, my room, and, more than anything, my bed. But when she grew bored of that aspect of my life, she decided it was time to revolutionize my chocolate business too. Just as I sweetened my chocolates, Antonia tried to sweeten me with her words. I resisted as long as I could, despite knowing that it was a losing battle. Her outlandish ideas overwhelmed me. I liked my chocolates as they were, classic, conservative, and delicious. We reached a truce that she could do whatever she wanted in the chocolatier's shop while it was closed, but none of her experiments would be sold in the store. She accepted with delight, arguing that she had no desire to sell anything. She only had a challenge in mind. Apparently, she had heard somewhere that there was a type of food that could cause an orgasm just by tasting it. The idea horrified me, as much as it seemed ridiculous, but my desire to please my wife and my promise to allow her to experiment forced me to go along with it. It was very interesting to see Antonia there, playing with childlike joy, combining ingredients and trying to come up with her magic recipe. The excitement of being newlyweds and seeing her over the pot, sweating from the heat of the stove, kneading passionately and licking her lips every time she tasted something she liked, made me break my strictest rules, and we ended up loving each other on the kitchen floor on more than one occasion. Watching Antonia move her voluptuous body among the instruments was motivating. She possessed an inner strength, passion, and energy that mesmerized me. In her madness and her mixing of ingredients, there was a certain method. When everything was flooded with the scent of jasmine, I couldn't deny that an artist had worked her magic. As Antonia progressed with her experiments, I noticed the increasing brightness in her eyes. I saw her becoming more and more excited. She worked in the workshop with greater intensity, and our encounters, whether in bed or on the floor of the shop, were more passionate. Real or not, it was clear that Antonia believed she was about to discover something extraordinary. One day she woke up unusually calm, that eerie stillness before the storm. I sensed she was up to something. Since she didn't have to work in the restaurant, she stayed to help me in the store. It didn't surprise me. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, but that day her offer sent a chill down my spine. The morning passed calmly, so I began to relax. At one point, I had to go down to the basement to look for some boxes of tea. When I returned to the kitchen, a powerful smell of jasmine altered my senses and aroused a concern in me. The aroma was much stronger than the fragrance my wife usually gave off. Alarmed, I rushed to the store to witness my wife offering Mr. Goodwill a tray of chocolates. But none seemed to be the typical recipes created hundreds of years ago by my family. They were Antonia's experiments. Horrified, I hurried to my elderly client, a frail man in his 80s. I was too late. Mr. Goodwill had already stuffed one of my wife's experimental sweets into his mouth. Standing in the middle of the store, I froze, waiting to see the old man's reaction. First of all, his eyes widened in astonishment, which seemed to convey satisfaction. Then the elderly man closed his eyes in excitement, trembling slightly and emitting a deep growl of pleasure. He collapsed to the ground. My wife looked at me with wide eyes, but her crooked smile revealed that, while I was alarmed and wondering whether the old man was alive, she must have been pondering whether her experiment had worked and if what the man had just experienced was an orgasm. With the initial shock over, we both approached the unconscious gentleman to investigate. Before we could even touch him, the old man sprang up like a spring on his feet and settled back into his chair.
"Please, ma'am, would you be so kind as to serve me another one of these?"
Asked the old man, breathing heavily. Excited, Antonia flung herself into my arms to celebrate her triumph. Whatever reaction her bonbon had evoked in the man, he found it worth repeating. However, both my wife and I prevented him from doing so, out of concern for his health. From that day on, the confections that Antonia called chocolate kisses became the most sought-after bonbons. I gladly accepted the new success of our business on the condition that I would always have a doctor nearby. There was no way to predict how intense a customer's reaction to these confections might be.